The first step towards healing is truth.
I would agree that the first step towards healing is truth. We can start with the truth about the identity of the people taken into slavery. We have been called Negroes, colored, black, African Americans, and now FBAs. But who are we really? We are actually the true people of the book. And yes, I'm talking about the Bible. We are the descendants of the ancient Israelites. And it is time to reclaim our identity. There is a centuries-old war on truth that has hidden our identity. We've been fed a false history full of lies and deception. But it's now time to wake up and reject the false narrative that was handed down to us.
The truth about the story of the transatlantic slave trade must be told. And this resolution at the United Nations is the first step. And we expect that with the consultations we've done and the endorsement of the AU, that finally the truth about the transatlantic slave trade being the gravest injustice and crime against humanity would be acknowledged.
Yes, it is important to acknowledge that it was a grave crime against humanity, but it is also time for the whole truth and nothing but the truth to come out, like the truth about who we really are. We were told that our ancestors were enslaved because of their skin color, based on the curse of Cain myth. The other was the curse of Ham. However, neither of those can be found in Scripture. There was no verse in the Bible identifying the mark placed on Cain as black skin, and there was no curse placed on Ham. That lie was used to justify slavery. The European slave trade was upheld because of the religious belief that dark skin was a curse. So when the United Nations voted against the UN slavery resolution describing the transatlantic slave trade as among the gravest crimes against humanity, it failed to take that lie into consideration. So Dan Negria, Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, criticized the measure, and he called it highly problematic because he said the United States does not recognize a legal right to reparations for historical wrongs that were not illegal under international law at the time they occurred. But how could it be legal if the framework of the slave trade was based on falsehoods about skin color? Let's look at excerpts from this book that was written in 1788. It's called Bible Defense of Slavery: An Origin, Fortunes, and History of the Negro Race. It was written by Reverend Joseph Priest. He says, with a view to an elucidation of this description, we present the work before us, in which an attempt is made to give in some measure a history of the origin, character, and fortunes of the Negro portion of mankind. He's not just talking about the origin. He's also going to present the history of their character, of the whole race. And they keep trying to tell our story, you all. He says, in pursuit of this subject, we hope there needs no apology because we have found it necessary to resort to the Holy Scriptures for important information which relates to our design, as it is well known that those parts of the book which were written by Moses are the eldest writings of the human race now extant and relate to the very first operations of the human race after the flood. As corroboratory of the developments of that miraculous book, we have also resorted to ancient and modern history, to travels, narratives, which go to aid us in the research. So he's trying to convince folks that he went to great lengths to find out the truth about the Negro race. So let's see what he has to say about the origin and history of the Negro race. He says it is important to go back to the beginning of time in this investigation, even up to the creation of the first human pair. By this method, and this only, do we hope to arrive at length to a knowledge of the desired objects. To ascertain the true origin of the Negro or African race at the very threshold of the work is exceedingly appropriate, as without such a discovery we shall appear to wander where no light shines to illume the way, amidst the mazes of ancient times. It goes on to say, how often do we hear questions like the following: from whence came the Ethiopian or black man? Who was his father? Did he spring from Adam or some other race? Can it be that from one and the same source the white, black, and red portions of mankind proceeded, with all the hues and shades of complexion which mark the human race? If so, is it not exceedingly mysterious that there is not now, nor ever has been, the occurrence of a variety so marked and distinctive as is black, white, and red, proceeding from the same parents naturally? Surely, if nature in the beginning or in the first ages produced from the same origin different races of men as to their complexions and physical constitutions, she ought to produce the same in these later ages, in order to be consistent with herself in this particular, as she is known to be in all others. So he says, on this subject, nature, or rather God in nature, has instructed us that without the intervention of divine power, there could and never would have been but one general complexion of the people of the globe, and that one complexion would have been like the first parents, whatever that complexion was. So he says, if the first two of humankind were created white, they could never have been the parents of black and red men. And science is also showing that it would only be possible for two white parents to have a black child if the parents carry recessive genes for darker skin pigmentation that could be passed on to the offspring. The same would be true for melanated parents. So he says, if they were created red, they could never have been the parents of black and white men. But here's the thing. Research is now showing that white skin only appeared about 8 to 10,000 years ago. We'll get to that later. Now he goes on to say, since the creation of man upon the earth, there never was produced from the same parents a variety of complexion, except in the case of the albino's production, which is now considered to be only the effect of disease. This particular, the producing of varieties, is a trait of the nature of beasts, but not of man, who in this particular are more fixed, being created in a way which has set him above the winds and the weather, as it relates to his physical being. Here it is proper to inquire, what then was the complexion of the two first of the human race, Adam and Eve, and the antediluvian world, their offspring? It says, in relation to this extremely curious as well as interesting subject, we shall refer first to a very ancient and very learned historian, namely Flavius Josephus, who says in his work on the Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, page 12, that Adam, the first man, was created red. The following are his words: God took dust from the ground and formed man, and inserted in him a spirit and a soul. This man was called Adam, which in the Hebrew tongue signifies one that is red, because he was formed of red earth, compounded together, for of that kind is virgin or true earth. In accordance with this statement of Josephus, in rendering a reason why God called the two first human beings by but one name, and that name being Adam, or the red man and woman, we find that the Hebrew language establishes that the words Adam, Adamah, Adami, and Admah have all a similar meaning. First, Adam as above signifies earthly man, red. Second, Adamah signifies red earth or blood. Third, Adami signifies my man red, earthly human. Fourth, Admah signifies earthy, red or bloody, all of which words are of the same class and spring from the same root, which is Adam, signifying red or copper color. The author says, from a view of this fact, it is difficult to account for the reason of the name of the first man and woman unless they were created red instead of white or black, as it is well known that the Hebrew language is governed in its power of naming visible existences of animals, fowls, fishes, etc., by their appearances or natures, and frequently by both, as in the case of the name Adam. And he goes on to talk about how this is connected to the intellect and the human nature. So he says, Josephus, as well as the genius of the Hebrew language, furnishes us with a clue like the golden thread in the labyrinth of the subterranean palace of ancient Thebes, leading to the right conclusion on this subject, namely, that Adam, with all the antediluvian race, were red or a copper-colored people. So you see here on the right that there are various shades of copper. For example, the two colors in the top right panel are listed as copper red and copper rose. But all of these colors have a brownish or dark brown hue. So when Adam was described as the red man or coppered color, what color are we really talking about? Shades of brown. So we need to understand that there are those who play games. They've been gaslighting our people for centuries regarding the color red and copper. They pretend not to know what it looks like. You have various shades of coppered colored dirt, and three men here with skin tones very close to those colors. What color are they? It certainly is not this. It doesn't even come close. Yet you hear some of these folks saying that red is a ruddy color and those with pale skin are considered ruddy because they turn red when they blush. Seriously? This is why they try so hard to control the narrative, you all. But we have to challenge their lies at every turn. He goes on to say that there is other testimony corroborative of what he's saying. He points to the writings of Moses as the highest possible authority on the matter, and then refers to various passages in the book of Genesis. He says, it provides a brief yet perfect history of the cosmogony of the earth, as well as the narrative of the births and deaths of the patriarchs from the beginning to the time in which he lived, a lapse of years consisting of 2,553 years and about 1,481 years before the birth of Josephus, who was just a lad when Messiah was put to death. It goes on to say that this incidental evidence in relation to the belief that Adam was created red is afforded by Moses in tracing the genealogical descent of one of the sons of Adam, namely that of Seth, from his father down to the patriarch Jacob, who was the immediate progenitor of the 12 tribes of the house of Israel. Now he's going to use the word Jews because that is the label that has been used interchangeably when speaking about the ancient Israelites and their descendants. However, we know that it is derived from Judah, but Judah was only one of the tribes of Israel. So I'll read it as Yehudi or Israelite. It says, now, as the Yehudis are red or a dark copper-colored race in their pure and unamalgamated condition, aids in proving that Adam was also of the same complexion, because Seth, an immediate son of Adam and Eve, was the direct progenitor of the Hebrew or Israelite people, commonly called the lineage of the holy seed. So he refers to various passages in the book of Genesis where the true genealogy of that race is traced out, coming down from Adam to Noah, then from Noah to Adam, and from thence to Jacob, the head of the 12 tribes of the Israelites. He points to the Arabs and Ishmaelites who are, he says, red and copper-colored, being that they are descendants of Abraham, who was of the race of Shem, and Shem being one of the sons of Noah. So he says, in the existence of the Arabs, we have a tangible and an abiding evidence that the true people were a people who were copper-colored, as the Arabs are brethren of the Israelites and have never mixed their blood with that of other people as much as the Israelites have. So he says most people in Christian countries, and when he says people in Christian countries, he's talking about those who identified as Europeans. At that time, they were called Christian nations. Most people in Christian countries have imbibed the opinion that Adam, Eve, the antediluvians, the Israelites, the old prophets, and patriarchs were all white men, most assuredly. But this is a mistake, he says, as is evident from the foregoing. Adam, therefore, in his primitive condition, before he had fallen and covered his limbs with clothing, was a glorious personage to look upon, being of a bright, ruddy red, like an image of gigantic size, formed of native copper instinct with life and motion. So when you look at this man on the right and the copper-colored penny next to him, it makes it plain what color we're talking about. Those described as red men were of a brownish hue. It's sad that we have to keep doing this, but liars hate truth. So we have to keep putting it out there. So this information comes from Ancient Egypt Online regarding the color red, and it's going to confirm what we've been saying. It says red was a powerful color because of its association with blood, in particular the protective power of the blood of Isis. So the Tajet amulet, which was placed at the throat of the mummy, was often made out of a red stone, and they're talking about red jasper. Now on the right you see an image of the jasper object they're referring to, and you see that it has a brownish hue. Here you also see another Egyptian artifact. It's the red jasper amulet of the sun. What color do you see here? Now the article goes on to talk about Set and how he was associated with the desert and foreign places, and thus with chaos and danger. So it says our word desert is derived from the Egyptian the red place. It says he was credited with defeating the serpent Apep, and so he and the color red were linked with victory, and he was patron of the Egyptian army. So this statue of him is supposed to be red, but we wouldn't call this stone red today. We would say brown. So it seems like over time shades of red got brighter. And we see that here in this National Library of Medicine article. It's talking about the core shell processing of natural pigment. The focus is on red ochre. Look at where the arrow is pointing, and you see the close-up view of the ochre sample. We can see hints of red in it, but again, most of us would say it has a dark brown or copper color. One more. This is from the Ancient Near East Today regarding Mesopotamian sculpture in color, and it says we must acknowledge the realistic aspect of the statues. The fact that the triad of red, black, and white belongs to a common practice worldwide does not mean that we should forget that these colors are fundamentally positive. So it is showing us some red robes here. And again, most of us would look at this and say this is closer to light brown. Now let's go back to the book, because you're going to see that after all of that research, the conclusion he came to is that the Most High had to have made Ham black and Japheth white. No. We'll look at that shortly, but let's look at this. He says, God, who made all things and endowed all animated nature with the strange and unexplained power of propagation, superintended the formation of two of the sons of Noah in the womb of their mother in an extraordinary and supernatural manner, giving to these two children such forms of bodies, constitutions of natures, and complexions of skin as suited his will. Those two sons were Japheth and Ham. Japheth he caused to be born white, differing from the color of his parents, while he caused Ham to be born black, a color still further removed from the red hue of his parents than was white. Do you see the play on words here? He says the black color was more extreme than the white color, and it is wholly contrary to nature. I would say just the opposite. Family, this is why it's so important to not only focus on the outright lies. We have to address the half-truths as well. Listen, he says the black color is wholly contrary to nature in the particular of animal generation as relates to the human race. But he came to the conclusion that the different hues had to be the result of the divine power, that the black and white man were produced equally as much as was the creation of the color of the first man. But now the truth is coming out to show that Japheth could not have been white. There are many reports confirming this, but we'll look at this report from researchers in Italy. According to their study, ancient Europeans had dark skin until about 3,000 years ago. So the people who are there now calling themselves Europeans were somewhere else in the Caucasus Mountains. It says this DNA study challenged long-held beliefs about the skin color of early Europeans, revealing that dark skin was widespread across the continent for far longer than previously thought. The results of the study show that pale skin did not become common among Europeans until around 3,000 years ago during the Iron Age. Now tie this back to Daniel's prophecy. Which kingdom are we talking about? It says, while some genetic traits linked to lighter skin began to emerge around 14,000 years ago, the transition to pale skin was much slower than anticipated. So the Reverend and others like him asked the wrong question. The real question is, how did we end up with this image? If they knew way back then that the original color of the first two humans had to be a copper color, make this make sense? So it shouldn't be a surprise that we were also warned that the heathens sought to paint the likeness of their images into our sacred books. It's brainwashing through imagery. What is that? It involves the use of visual and emotional stimuli to manipulate and control the mind, and it is heavily promoted in the media. We have to dispel the lies that we were told and no longer accept the narrative about what the descendants of the ancient Israelites looked like, when the historical, DNA, and biblical evidence is telling us that they looked like this. We have to wake up to the truth about our history. We are the descendants of the ancient Israelites, and you can help us spread the word by sharing this video. Hit the like button, and you're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. That will help us increase our reach. We will end it here. Be sure to tune in for the live this coming Wednesday at 8 p.m. Yah willing. Join me next time.